So, Richard, you know how Elon Musk isn't a big fan of remote working, right?
Well, that's an understatement. Elon is the world's #1 remote work hater.
Well, haters gonna hate, but personally, I think he's wrong.
Whoa, it's a brave man to bet against Elon.
Well, our next guest has gone all in on that bet, and so far, he's up $400 million. Sagar Khatri is the founder and CEO of Multiplier, a SaaS-based recruitment platform that's unlocking global opportunities for businesses and talent alike.
In just 3 years, Sagar and his team have built a global business valued at over $400 million. He's also just been named on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. I think we should hear what he's got to say.
Definitely. Welcome to the TransformAsians podcast. Today we have Sagar Khatri with us, who's the CEO of Multiplier. Welcome, Sagar.
Thanks, CJ and Richard, for having me here. Really excited to be here.
Excellent, thank you. So, Sagar, you're the CEO of Multiplier, a Singaporean startup that's about 3 years old and already worth $400 million. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey of how you got to this point?
Right. So maybe a bit of background about myself before
Please.
we deep dive into Multiplier. So I was, obviously I live in Singapore now, but I was born and bred in India, graduated from IIT, and then actually went to Tokyo as an investment banker. Spent a couple of years there and then moved to Singapore, spent a couple more years in banking here, and then I joined a tech company here where I was tasked to expand globally in Australia and Japan. And it took roughly 6 or 7 months to open one bank account in a developed market like Australia. And don't even ask about Japan. That's where I thought, hey, there has to be a more appropriate way and more cost-effective way of expanding globally. And that's where the idea of Multiplier came about. And we've been very fortunate to have 2 great co-founders, Vamsi and Amrit, and some great investors such as Sequoia and Tiger and DST, who helped us really propel this forward and be where we are today.
Okay, Sagar, what would be really interesting to understand is a bit more about Multiplier's business, its focus, and what's the sort of grand vision for Multiplier in terms of how it wants to transform the world.
Right. So what Multiplier essentially is a global employment SaaS platform. It helps companies begin small, employ talent globally in 150 countries without having to open their legal entities. So we are essentially a global employment of record platform. Our proposition to clients are very simple. You can employ anyone, anywhere in 2 minutes without having to open your office, legal entities, or hire payroll person, benefit person, tax person, and so on and so forth. So we make hiring globally extremely easy, whether you want to access talent in an international market or or access the international market for selling your goods and services.
Right. Okay. And what do you see as the big vision? What's the space that you really want to transform?
Right. The problem that we really wanted to solve and why we started Multiplier was the problem of talent crunch. See, we live in a world where talent crunch is a very real problem, right? I was giving you Singapore example. In Singapore, we need roughly 100,000 software developers, but we only produce 2,000-3,000. Now, these companies to grow fast, they need access to great talent, and hence they have to tap talent, which is not in Singapore, in global markets, right? So there's a Conferry report which says by 2030, there'll be a talent shortage, skill talent shortage. I'm talking about white collar talent of roughly 70-80 million skill talent. And this report, it's a funny fact about this report, it predicted that India will be a net talent supplier, which we are seeing not true anymore, right? Because even a lot of Indian companies are using us to explore talent in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe and so on and so forth. So really, the market is much deeper than these guys thought.
Yes.
And if you think about how the world has changed, right? Maybe 10 years ago, the definition of globalization has really changed as well. Maybe 10 years ago, globalization meant a company in US. They wanted to now access markets, let's say a Singapore market. And that's where they are called multinational, right? Because now they are accessing Singapore market. They have to come and open their entity, hire a person, and so on and so forth. But today's definition of globalization has moved away from access to demand markets to access to talent markets.
Right.
Like if you think about Multiplier, we are our own workforce is in 45 countries.
Wow.
and 60 nationalities. So it's global from day one, right? Same for you guys as well.
We're
right?
global, but we're not 60 nationalities. That's impressive.
So every country will be global from day one. Like, for example, I always give an example that if you ask me or any of my partners, where's the headquarters of Multiplier? Now, we are obviously incorporated in Singapore, but majority of our revenue comes from US. The biggest team that we have in India. Our sales team is located in 15 countries. So it's really, we are moving towards an era where the answer to the question, where is your headquarters, is not going to be so simple to be answered.
Yeah, right.
So
Okay.
how is this transformation affecting the businesses that you guys are working for? And how are these businesses reacting to this general change, both in terms of this talent crunch as well as the kind of services that you guys are offering in?
Right. So two parts to it, right? One of the things that companies really like about working with Multiplier is access to talent, right? See, talent is such an intangible asset that people really don't think about. But now, in my experience of building a business, which is where it is, the only thing that matters is people. If you have, you will always say, hey, this problem is really difficult, I can't solve it. The only solution that is if you get somebody who has solved that problem before in the shortest possible time and shortest possible budget.
Yes.
Now, that's one thing really, for example, a company who is located in US wanted access to AI engineers, or a company which is located in Singapore wanted access to back-end engineers from Serbia. It's really changing the game, right? The other thing where Multiplier is really having an impact is access to demand markets. Like, we work with a lot of Indian customers who, as you know, there's a way of Indian software companies coming out of India now, whose primary market is US, right? People also say that every piece of software that US uses is being rewritten in India.
Yes.
Now, these companies, for them to sell their product to US markets, earlier it was quite expensive because US is a very high compliance market.
Yeah.
You want to do business in US, you better have a lot of money, otherwise they can go after you till the IRS and whatnot, right? So what we have enabled is now these companies can sell their product tomorrow in US without even opening an entity.
Yeah.
So that's the impact that we've seen. Really, obviously there's a lot of talk about where is this headed and so on and so forth. But really, we have seen deep penetration of this across organizations, whether you are MNC or an enterprise or an SME and whatnot.
Oh.
Fascinating.
And that would be then in terms of your clients, but also the workforces. For both of them, that would be really changing people's lives.
Absolutely. I think the biggest impact that it has on the lives of people.
Right.
Right. Now think about talent which is, obviously very capable, but born in a developing market.
Yes.
Right? One thing that I always talk about, like we live in Singapore, right? You go 50 miles, you'll land in Indonesia. And your salary is literally 1/4
Yes.
for the same skill set, right?
Yes.
Now that is very unfair.
Yes.
Right? Your salary, your earning power shouldn't be defined by where you're born.
Yeah.
So we're trying to change that. With Multiplier, we are giving these folks the opportunity to dream. Dream about a world without limits. To dream a world where no matter you're born, you can have access to the best opportunity in the world. And similarly, empowering organizations to have access to the best talent, no matter where they're incorporated.
So that's an incredibly transformational approach, isn't it? I mean, it really is. You're changing people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
So I think that's a great way to segue into the next question, which is, if you look at, and this is, you can answer it either way. If you look at Multiplier, would you define it or characterize it as a tech business or really a people business? How do you see that?
So this is a question that I get often. We are backed by venture investors who are always interested whether this is a tech business or people business because they all obviously want to invest in tech business with skills without adding more people and cost, right? And really, the answer here is now that we have at a significant scale, we payroll tens of thousands of people globally in 100+ markets. It is this is such a complicated business. It's literally impossible to scale if your tech is not solid.
Yes,
right.
Of course.
Right. So think about we have entities in 100+ countries. We run payroll in 100+ countries. We take care of our insurance in 100+ countries. We take care of our employment contracts, leave, expense, everything that you can think of. Now, to do that in 100 plus countries, and we send hundreds of millions of dollars in 100 countries, right? To run such a complicated business without technology is almost impossible. So I think, people element of it is very, very important. But one thing that we have done from day one is we've always gone product first. So even if we're roughly 400 people today globally, and good 40% of that workforce belongs to our engineering, product and data and design team.
Right.
So really a tech business at the heart of it.
Cool. And talking about that, I think we've all heard about the kind of impact that AI is having in the world. How do you think it's going to have, what kind of impact do you think it's going to have on the job market generally in the upcoming years?
Right. Now, that's a great question, and it's the question for the times that we are living in, right? So again, I'm not a big AI expert, and whatever view I would share, it would be a view relevant to my business. We have seen two trends. We have seen the number of AI folks that are getting hired, AI engineers across the board, has drastically increased. Now, where is this talent really focused? China. China has great AI talent. So a lot of American companies who want to access China talent use Multiplier. Japan has a lot of AI talent.
Oh, really?
India has some AI talent, right? Eastern Europe has a lot of AI talent. So folks are using that. The second part to your question is, would we see impact on that people's job? I think AI will really help you do your job better rather than really replace people, right? Like if you look at Multiplier internally, and we were joking the other day that obviously our engineering team is of very high caliber and everybody wants to work on AI because it's cool, right? But lots of companies and lots of things in life would be AI and lots of things won't be AI, right? I think we are one of the business on the front end may not be so transformative or change because of AI. But we are definitely leveraging AI internally. Our engineers have really increased their productivity by using the AI tools that are available. The second thing that has really helped us is, we have in our business, customer support is a massive element, right? Because we have people on our payroll. And if their salary is delayed by one day, they get very nervous.
Yes.
So we've really increased that support metrics using AI. So, hey, what's the law in Greece? When I'm going to get my salary in India, all of those questions we've really automated.
Oh, cool. That's fascinating.
And we must say many congratulations, because you've recently been named on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, which is fantastic.
Richard was surprised to realize you were under 30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was very depressed, to be honest. But, we'll move on from that. But
you are also under 30, right, Richard?
Well, in my mind, I am, yes, totally. How do you, as kind of a young leader, though, how do you balance the drive for innovation and change with, some of the big decisions that maybe sometimes need wisdom and kind of experience? How do you balance between those things?
Right. That's a very, very interesting question. I think, first of all, Forbes is a great platform. I'm deeply grateful that they thought I was worthy enough to be part of that platform. I can tell you nothing has changed in my life. It's a great platform, but really what we have tried from day one is how is brand multiplier out there, the awareness is higher and is much more penetrated than any of its employees or any of its founders, right?
Yes.
The way we have always run Multiplier, whether it's me, Vamsi or Amrit, who are my co-founders, is everybody should know about Multiplier. Whether they know about who Sagar is, it's irrelevant, right? So that has always been our thought process. Internally, the way we execute is, we love silent execution. We love not speak too much English, but really bias for action. We love not having a craving for getting recognized. We love those kind of people, and that's the culture that we have built, right? So really, that's how we think about it. But very recently, now we've at a stage where we want to aim for $100 million in revenue in next 1-2 years.
Right.
The goal really is, or the lever that we've identified is brand awareness, right? And to increase brand awareness, founder brand awareness is also very, very important.
Yes,
so, which also means I go and talk about Multiplier in Web Summit or Forbes event and whatnot. So that's really a platform that has helped us. And maybe I'm biased, but I don't think wisdom is related to age, right? we love to hire young leaders who are really hungry, but we believe they can learn things faster and can execute, right? But we also equally have extremely matured leaders who have seen customer success for 20 years in their life. And they'll come and have an impact in first 3 months of their existence. Or sales leaders who have been selling for 20 years in B2B SaaS, right? So really that has been our mentality. A good mix of young, hungry talent and a gray hair, if you may.
You may.
No pun intended.
No, you definitely may. Yeah. Do you find, just to kind of build on that a bit, do you find though that in terms of the multiplier offering, you get a different perspective from, I guess, maybe more of the grey-haired community, if you like, than the younger kind of more innovative, kind of more disruptive sort of leaders?
Right. So I think, quite often, and it's a very good point, right? Quite often, maybe just a precursor to that, right? We sell our products to like a Singapore government or a Singapore Airlines, but we also sell it to like tech companies and so on and so forth, right? So we've seen buyer persona across, 60-year-old CHROs to maybe 25-year-old founders, right? The difference that we have seen is, again, the people buy our product for different reasons, right? Some people think that, hey, they are selling remote working solution, but that's not true. Really, the core of our product is global.
Yes.
So we love the word remote, but we love the word global much more, right? So anybody wants to go global, and everybody has a need for our product, right? Now, one thing that we have seen is people who are experienced, who are more matured, who are used to doing things a certain way. And in some cases, it's more about power dynamics, right?
Yeah, like sure, I agree.
If I'm a leader who has always had a corner office and 60 people waiting to wish me good morning every day, I wouldn't want to lose that.
Yes.
And in some cases, it was about, I always going to office has always been a thing.
Yes.
Right. I wouldn't know what to do if I can't go to office.
Yes.
So really, it's more about preferences and in the way the habits are set for these more matured and more established folks, right? The great thing about life is when the world would be, in 10, 20, 30 years time, when people like me would be leaders in all these organizations, they would have seen a very different world.
Yes.
They would have started the businesses or they would have started their careers during COVID times. And they would be okay working remotely and they would be okay giving freedom to their workforce. They would be okay not seeing everybody. In fact, they would prefer not to see everybody. So really quite a spectrum of people that we deal with and preferences.
I hear you, man. I'm equally divided and split on this position as well.
What is Richard's view on this?
Remote versus office.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think actually, to be honest, I think the point that you made, which is a really good way of thinking about it, is to think about remote versus global.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If your desire is to go global and you need to scale, it's clearly only one way to do it, isn't there? Which is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think that kind of point and that sort of discussion area has been had enough. I think it's a really powerful way of thinking. The desire to be global.
Yeah.
If you're serious and if you're kind of level-headed about it, I guess there has to be remote, surely.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just can't go at the speed of your opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's I guess that's my kind of key thought.
No, absolutely. And that's where I think people confuse global with remote. We work with quite a lot of established public market businesses who have been global from day one, right? A lot of their teams who are on our payroll sit out of office. And we provide, because at Multiplier, we can also help you with office. So really, everybody works out of office, but it's just there. If I'm an American company, I want to expand to Canada, I do need people in Canada. And I'm not yet ready to make a commitment of establishing an entity and putting paid up capital up front.
Which from a business perspective is really attractive.
Absolutely.
Clearly.
So these guys swoop in, set you up with your office,
Yes.
get your people in there, and I think even supply laptops and manage those.
Yes, supply laptops.
I mean, I can remember in roles I've had in the past, opening physical offices in China, in India, in Australia, in Indonesia, and just the process of doing that, and just it's just days and nights of hard slog, trying to hire staff physically, to staff the office, to be able to get started. It's incredibly difficult, actually, certainly in my experience. Yeah.
That's why you guys got a great value proposition, man.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Any final questions, Richard?
One question I was going to ask you a little bit about was not so much the idea of global versus remote, but also the area of remote versus in the office, so work from home, work in the office. And one debate, sort of discussion point that I've had is that for a lot of junior and mid-level staff, I'm sure it's one you hear a lot, if they're only working remote, they struggle to get the mentoring and the coaching and the kind of social aspect to the job that working it from home as opposed to working in the office. But am I right in thinking that's not really the market that you're particularly focused on?
Right. So maybe 2 points there, Richard. I think one is we hear about this argument called, learning happens via osmosis. It's such a beautiful argument, right? But I think really the point that we miss there is, in today's world, as a skill set, documentation is very, very important, right? There are a lot of folks who don't like documenting, who really like to tap on somebody's shoulder and ask for updates, or who like to just call people and ask for updates. Actually, that really takes away from productivity. At Multiplier, we firmly believe in not having too many meetings, in working in an async manner, where if I can be updated via a Slack message or a nice email with a very nicely written highlight,
or a ticket update,
I would never want to get on a call. It's just so expensive to get on a call, right? So learning happens by osmosis is an argument that is propelled and proliferated by folks who do not love documentation.
And people who don't actually understand the paradigm of async working and working across platforms like, task tools and project management tools, right? So it's an entire paradigm shift.
Yes.
You can't just do that by just letting people run away and work remotely without having all of these processes and systems in place as well. And as you said, the work ethic to document and the work ethic to put things down in writing. Those habits are essential, and once you have those habits, you can work successfully remotely. But if you think you're going to be tapping someone on the shoulder or calling someone all the time, then it's not going to be productive.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I have a very strong preference of not seeing people every of my employee every day. Like, it's just too daunting for a young CEO, right? Like, what happens if somebody comes and says, hey, I want salary increment, or hey, I have this problem? Like, you can't be productive either. Versus I sit here and if somebody wants to talk to me, they send me an agenda first. So it also gives me time to prep. And okay, I have a CEO title, but it's really a people manager. So if you just trickle down that argument, every manager would be so productive if they know exactly what their resource wants to talk about, and they get on a call. If it's very important to get on a call, otherwise it can be sorted by a message.
Again, I agree with you, but I think there is a case for junior staff, perhaps very junior staff. Once you've got certain number of years, certain amount of experience in work and working in this fashion, in this style, it's not a problem. But if you're a young graduate, fresh out of school, who doesn't actually understand this, that culture has got to be built firstly, and then people do need some kind of mentoring as well. It's a tough call. Ultimately, I still think if you've got a really young, fresh out of school person who doesn't understand that kind of culture, who doesn't actually know that way of working, it's good to have some kind of physical mentorship. But someone, maybe 3 years and being inculcated in that culture, then it's not a problem, they can run with it. But it's not very common to even get that kind of culture in most companies in Singapore, to be honest. I don't think many companies operate asynchronously, as you say. I mean, we've built that culture from day one. So when we moved into COVID, the next day we were all working from home and everything worked just fine because we had, tickets running everywhere. We had Slack running everywhere. People knew how to gather. People knew what to do. But if you don't have that and you've just come out of school, it can be a somewhat jarring experience possibly for a fresh young graduate.
And can I just
Please.
quickly ask for people like me that have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes.
What do you mean by asynchronous?
Asynchronous working means I send an update into the cloud.
Right.
And when you wake up, you get online and you see what's going on.
It's see.
Asynchronous. We are not synchronized. I do my thing, I update the system, and when you need it, you look at it and you can see what's happening.
I'll give you a good example.
Yeah.
Like if an employee is calling me on my phone, I get very surprised.
That's synchronous.
That's because, what is that need for somebody to call me? Is there something wrong?
Right.
Whereas when I was a banker, calling people every 5 minutes was a norm, right?
Yes.
Now, to CJ's point, have you realized very comfortably we have moved and started working from home? Where we just had a good argument about how remote is not global and global is not remote, right? So a lot of 2 points. A lot of new yes, you might hire let's say a finance analyst in India, but you might have an office in India, right? And you have people mentoring them in India. Second, one thing that we conveniently forget is if they are coming out of school now, they also did their studies remotely.
Oh, that is true. I forget that.
Which means they were, whether it was an MBA or it was a bachelor's or a post, whatever, right? Now in today's world, in schools, everybody is using Async tools like Zoom and Slack and whatnot, right? So really they are wired to learn and get onboarded in a work from home setting or remote setting, which essentially brings me back to my next point. The skill set that the organizations lack is not whether people are willing to learn or whether you have a great onboarding program. So really at Multiplier, we have invested in hiring a team, an onboarding team, which focuses on 2-3 weeks of great onboarding people.
Yes.
So for your vendors' staff, for your clients' customers' staff,
for our employees,
for your internal team.
For our internal team. And if we hire a salesperson, then they'll go 3 weeks of onboarding program. Then they'll have a test. They'll appear for the test and they'll get a certificate. So now they are Multiplier demo certified. So really the answer is good onboarding rather than seeing people face to face every day.
I agree. I think there's a lot of value in solid onboarding. Yeah. There's some great platforms out there today as well that's doing some good work in the onboarding space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that onboarding area, certainly in our industry, has been incredibly badly done traditionally.
Yeah, you just get thrown at a desk and say, here's your computer. And here's the next meeting, show up.
Yeah, and you're in the deep end, basically. Very badly prepared, badly understanding of the way things work, etc.
Of course, we're not speaking about our own agency. We're talking about the industry in general.
Yes.
I think we're a lot better at it than most, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. We're sort of coming towards the end of the discussion today. So, Sagar, one good question that we would love to ask you is, the journey you've been on over the last few years. What one key piece of advice would you have for young entrepreneurs starting out, to kind of really go for it to the greatest extent possible?
Right. I think, summarizing a simple advice might be difficult, but let me share a couple of point of views. I think we've had quite a few learnings in building this out, and if people are going to listen, I would really want them to benefit if it's helpful. One of the key points that I realized is, as a CEO of the business, you have to get things started always. Now, you might hire the best people out there, but it's your responsibility to get people started. So if some project is delayed, or if you want to sell to a certain type of customers, you want to launch a new product, you want to go up market, you have to show the way. And just push it past the initiation stage and it will take over, right? So people will take over. So that's one of the advice, I think. But in general, like a few things that I've realized, as a founder, as a CEO, you have really, if I have to summarize, and really if you have to choose, you have two jobs. One is raising capital. And second is, hiring people. So financial capital and human capital. The rest, everything can be outsourced to other people.
Fair enough. That's beautiful, really good advice. Really
Succinct,
good advice.
Very clear.
Yeah. And so coming to the end of the discussion then, we always ask our guests, would you have sort of one piece of advice for people, particularly in this space of whether it's globalizing, whether they're trying to transform their workforce, kind of what would be the critical piece of advice that you would give?
Yeah, I think, we live in a world where, everybody's facing talent crunch. Mm-hmm. If you think you are not, you haven't realized it yet. Today's world is a world where people or employees want to do the job they love without leaving the people that they love. Mm. And the sooner that you realize that, the faster you'll get access to great talent, which is an absolutely must for you to grow your business.
Mm. Fantastic. Thank you for that, Sagar.
Really wonderful advice.
I love that nugget.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you, Sagar. That's been an insightful conversation. And I think for me personally, the key takeaway has been the distinction that you've made between global and a remote workforce. I think often we kind of meld them two together and kind of, get confused about the reason, the rationale they exist even. But a global workforce is really a workforce that you build to grow your business quickly across the world, whereas a remote workforce is really just a way of working. And that's quite different and, different strokes for different folks, I suppose. Richard, what about you?
Yeah, I'd kind of build on that. I think the point that you made earlier about being able to go global instantly, in effect, is an amazing point. I mean, I've been through, as I said, many experiences trying to open offices in various parts of APAC, and just the time and the stress and the hassle and the pressure and all of those things. This idea of being able to go global instantly is a very, very transformative thought, actually, which is really powerful. So that's been a fantastic discussion, some amazing insights, Sagar. So really, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, folks, for having me. It was a great discussion.
Pleasure.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the TransformAsians podcast. Been a great range of insights today on change within the employment market and how organizations can go global. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and over to Sharon.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.